When rancher Elias Ward followed a baby's desperate cry into his barn on that violent Colorado night, he had no idea he was about to make a choice that would change 3 lives forever. What he found bleeding in the hay, a dying woman clutching an infant, was just the beginning, because the men hunting them wouldn't stop. The inheritance was too valuable, the secret too dangerous. And Elias Ward, a man who'd sworn never to care again, was about to break that promise in the most beautiful, terrifying way possible. Stay with me until the end of this story, and please comment what city you're watching from so I can see how far this tale has traveled. The storm hit Crowley Ridge like God's own fury. Elias Ward stood at his cabin window, watching lightning tear the black sky into fragments of white-hot rage. Rain hammered the roof with fists of ice, and somewhere in the darkness, his barn door was banging loose again. He'd meant to fix that latch. 3 weeks he'd meant to fix it, and now the wind was going to rip the whole damn thing off its hinges. He was reaching for his coat when he heard it, a sound that didn't belong to the storm. Elias froze, one arm halfway into the sleeve, head cocked toward the window. Thunder rolled across the valley, shaking the glass in its frame. He waited. The sound came again, thin, high, desperate, unmistakable. A baby crying. His hand dropped from the coat. That couldn't be right. The nearest neighbor was 8 miles east, and nobody traveled in weather like this. Nobody with sense, anyway. He listened harder, certain he'd imagined it, that the wind was playing tricks or the storm was making the barn timbers scream in some new and unsettling way. Then he heard it again, clearer this time. Definitely a baby. Jesus Christ, Elias muttered, grabbing his coat and jamming his hat down hard. He snatched the lantern from the table, lit it with shaking hands, and stepped out into the teeth of the storm. The rain hit him like a wall. Within seconds, his coat was soaked through, water streaming from his hat brim. The wind tried to rip the lantern from his grip, and he clutched it tight against his chest, bending low as he pushed toward the barn. Mud sucked at his boots. Lightning painted the world silver and shadow. The barn door was hanging crazy on one hinge, swinging wild in the wind. Elias caught it with his shoulder, fighting it still long enough to slip inside. The darkness swallowed him whole, cut through only by the weak gold circle of lantern light. "Hello?" His voice was rough from disuse. He lived alone. Sometimes he went days without speaking. "Anybody in here?" The crying was louder now, coming from the back stalls. Elias raised the lantern higher, pushing past his 2 horses, both wide-eyed and stamping nervously, toward the sound. His heart was hammering now, fear and adrenaline mixing into something that tasted like copper on his tongue. "Hello? I'm not going to hurt you. He stopped dead. In the last stall, in a nest of hay his mare had scattered, lay a woman. She was young, maybe 25, with dark hair plastered to a face the color of old paper. Her dress was torn and mud-caked, one sleeve ripped completely away. But it was the blood that made Elias's breath catch. So much blood, dark and wet, spreading from a wound high on her left side, just below her ribs. And in her arms, wrapped in what looked like a man's coat, was a baby. The infant was maybe a few days old, red-faced and squalling, tiny fists waving. The woman had one arm curled around the child, holding on with what looked like the very last of her strength. Her eyes were closed. For one horrible moment, Elias thought she was dead. Then her eyes opened. They were gray, pale gray like storm water, and they fixed on him with an intensity that damn near knocked him backward. "Please," she whispered. The word was barely audible over the baby's cries and the storm's roar. "Please, help my baby!" Elias dropped to his knees beside her, setting the lantern down in the straw. Up close, he could see the wound more clearly, a knife cut, clean-edged and deep, still seeping blood despite the cloth she'd pressed against it. She'd tried to bind it with strips torn from her dress, but she'd lost too much blood. Way too much. "Ma'am, you need a doctor? I need to—" "No doctor." She tried to sit up and failed, falling back with a gasp of pain. "No, no one can know. They'll find us. They'll kill her." Her eyes locked on his again, fierce despite the weakness. "Promise me. Promise me you'll keep her safe." "Who's looking for you, ma'am? I don't—" "Promise me." The ferocity in her voice shocked him. She was dying, She had to know she was dying, and she was using her last strength to make sure this baby survived. Elias looked down at the infant in her arms. The little girl, he could see now it was a girl with a tiny pink face and a shock of dark hair, had stopped crying and was staring up at him with dark, unfocused eyes. Something in his chest twisted hard. "I promise," he heard himself say. "I'll keep her safe, both of you. I swear it." The woman's body sagged with relief. "Her name is Adele." She pronounced it the French way, Adele. She's my sister's baby, Margaret's baby, but Margaret is," her voice cracked. "Margaret's dead, and he wants to kill Adele too." Who wants to kill a baby?" Elias was pulling off his coat as he spoke, balling it up to press against the wound. The woman gasped, but didn't pull away. "Her father, Robert Kane, in Denver." Each word seemed to cost her. "There's land, worth a fortune. If Adele's dead, he inherits. Margaret found out, told me, made me promise." She was fading now, her voice dropping to barely a whisper. "I took Adele and ran, but they caught up. One of Kane's men stabbed me near Pueblo. I thought I'd lost them, thought I could make it." Her eyes were closing. Elias gripped her shoulder, shaking her gently. Ma'am, stay with me. What's your name?" "Marion." Her eyes fluttered open one more time. "Marin Cole? In my pocket. Papers. Proof. Keep them safe." "Marin, listen to me. I'm going to carry you inside, both of you. You're going to be fine. You hear me? You're going to take care of her." Marin's hand closed around his wrist with surprising strength. "Don't let Robert find her. Don't let my sister's death be for nothing." "I won't. I swear to God I won't." Marin's hand fell away. Her breathing was shallow now, rapid and wet sounding. The baby started to cry again, a thin wail that cut through everything. Elias didn't let himself think. Thinking would mean acknowledging how bad this was, how likely it was that this woman wouldn't survive the night. Instead, he moved. He lifted Marin as carefully as he could, one arm under her shoulders, the other under her knees. She was small, slight, and weighed almost nothing. The baby stayed cradled against her chest. "Hold on," he told her, even though he wasn't sure she could hear him anymore. "Just hold on." Getting back to the house was a nightmare. The storm had gotten worse, if that was possible. The wind screamed like something alive and angry, trying to tear Marin from his arms. Rain lashed his face until he could barely see. He left the lantern in the barn. He needed both arms, and navigated by lightning and memory. When he finally kicked open the cabin door and stumbled inside, he was shaking from more than just cold. He laid Marin on his bed, the only bed, and carefully unwrapped the baby from the coat. Adele was still crying, her little face screwed up in misery. Hungry, probably, and cold, and terrified in the way babies are when the world suddenly becomes chaos. Elias had no idea what to do with a baby. He'd been married once, a long time ago. Sarah had wanted children, but that was before the fever took her, before Elias had buried her and moved to this godforsaken corner of Colorado to forget. Now he stood in his cabin with a crying infant in one arm and a dying woman on his bed, and he realized he'd forgotten how to do any of this. "First things first," he muttered to himself. That's what Sarah used to say. When you're overwhelmed, take it one step at a time. He grabbed every blanket he owned and wrapped Adele in 3 of them, making sure she was warm and secure. Then he laid her in the wooden crate he usually used for storing potatoes, cushioning it with a folded quilt. It wasn't a cradle, but it would do. The baby's cries softened to whimpers. Then he turned to Marin. She was unconscious now, her breathing so shallow he had to lean close to be sure she was breathing at all. The blood had soaked through his coat and was starting to pool on the bed. He needed to stop the bleeding, clean the wound, keep her warm. He'd done this before, years ago, with injured cattle and once with a ranch hand who'd been gored by a bull. But this felt different, more desperate, more important. Elias built up the fire until the cabin glowed with heat. He boiled water, found his medical supplies, such as they were, and cut away the ruined dress to expose the knife wound. It was bad, deep and ragged at the edges, like the blade had twisted going in. But it had missed the vital organs, or she'd already be dead. He cleaned the wound with whiskey, stitched it closed with the same surgical precision he used on torn saddle leather, and bound it tight with clean cloth. Marin never woke, never even flinched. That scared him more than the blood. When he was finished, he covered her with every remaining blanket and checked on Adele. The baby had fallen asleep, one tiny fist pressed against her cheek. She looked peaceful now, innocent, completely unaware that someone wanted her dead. Elias sank into his chair by the fire and put his head in his hands. What the hell had he just walked into? He looked at the papers Marin had mentioned. He'd found them in her pocket while cleaning the wound. They were folded tight and wrapped in oilcloth to protect them from the rain. Legal documents, mostly, signed and sealed. A deed to property in Denver. A marriage certificate for Margaret Cole and Robert Kane. A birth certificate for Adele Kane, born just 4 days ago. And a letter, written in a shaking hand. To whom it may concern, my husband Robert means to kill our daughter to secure my family's land. I have hidden evidence of his debts and schemes in the property deed itself. If I die, please protect Adele. She is innocent. Margaret Cole Kane. The letter was dated 3 days ago. Elias read it twice, his jaw tightening with each pass. Then he looked at the deed. At first it seemed straightforward. A transfer of land from Margaret's father to Margaret, dated 5 years prior. But when he held it up to the light, he could see something else. Faint marks in the margins. Numbers. Names. Dates of transactions. Margaret had documented everything, every debt Robert had hidden, every shady deal, every lie. She'd turned the deed into evidence. And now men were hunting her baby sister to destroy that evidence and claim the inheritance. Jesus, Elias whispered. He was a simple rancher. He bred horses, grew what food he could in this rocky soil, and tried not to think too much about the past. He didn't involve himself in other people's problems. He'd learned that lesson the hard way. But he'd made a promise to a dying woman. And he'd never broken a promise, not once in his life. Elias stood and walked to the window. The storm was finally starting to break. The rain had softened to a steady drizzle, and the lightning had moved east, flickering on the horizon like distant candles. Morning would come in a few hours, and with morning would come decisions. He could take Marin to the doctor in town, but she'd said no doctors, and for good reason. If Robert Kane had men hunting her, a small-town doctor's office would be the first place they'd look. He could go to the sheriff, but what proof did he have? A wounded woman and a baby? Papers that might be dismissed as forgeries? And how far did Robert Kane's influence reach? Denver was a powerful city. Rich men had long arms. No. For now, the safest thing was to keep them here. Hidden. Let Marin heal, figure out the next move. If Marin survived. Elias checked on her again. She was still breathing, but her skin was clammy and her pulse was weak. He'd done everything he could. Now it was up to her. Adele woke then, crying softly. Elias lifted her from the crate, awkward and uncertain. She was so small, so fragile. He held her against his chest, rocking slightly, the way he vaguely remembered Sarah rocking her sister's baby once. "You're safe here, little one," he murmured. "I don't know what the hell I'm doing, but you're safe. I promise." The baby quieted, as if she understood. And Elias Ward, who had spent the last 10 years building walls around his heart, felt something in those walls begin to crack. The next 3 days were a blur of sleepless vigilance. Marin developed a fever the first night. Elias fought it with cool claws and willow bark tea, forcing tiny sips between her cracked lips whenever she was conscious enough to swallow. She thrashed and mumbled in her delirium, calling out for Margaret, begging someone named Gage to stop, crying out that they had to run. Gage. Elias filed that name away. If someone came looking, it helped to know what to call them. Adele demanded feeding every 2 hours. Elias had no milk, but he had a cow. He'd never milked Betty for a baby before. Usually her milk went to the calves or his morning coffee, but he figured milk was milk. He heated it carefully, diluted it a little the way he remembered his mother doing for orphaned kittens, and fed it to Adele with a clean rag dipped in a cup. It was messy and slow, and the baby protested the unfamiliar method, but she drank. She survived. They both survived. On the morning of the fourth day, Elias woke in his chair to find Marin's eyes, open and clear, watching him. "You're still here," she whispered. "Where the hell else would I be?" Elias stood quickly, moving to the bed. "How do you feel?" "Like I've been stabbed." A ghost of a smile crossed her face. "Where's Adele?" "Sleeping, finally." Elias gestured to the crate by the fire. "She's got a good set of lungs on her." Marin tried to sit up, winced, and fell back. "Easy," Elias said, helping her adjust the pillows. "You lost a lot of blood. You're not out of danger yet." "I know." She closed her eyes briefly. "I remember the barn. You found us. I thought we'd die there." "You almost did." Elias pulled his chair closer. "Marin, I need to know what we're facing. You said Robert Kane wants Adele dead. Who is he, and who's Gage?" Marin's face hardened. "Robert Kane is my brother-in-law. Margaret married him 4 years ago. We thought he loved her. We were wrong." Her voice cracked. "He loved her money. Her father's land in Denver, 20 acres right in the heart of the city, worth a fortune in gold and railroad contracts. When Margaret's father died 2 years ago, he left it all to her. And then to Adele when Margaret died. Yes, Robert has debts, bad ones, gambling, bad investments. He thought if Margaret died young, before having children, the land would pass to him. But then Adele was born." Marin's hands clenched in the blankets. Margaret realized what he was planning. She heard him talking to someone, a man named Gage Rowden, an outlaw. Robert hired him to kill Adele once Margaret was gone. What happened to Margaret? She died in childbirth. Tears slipped down Marin's cheeks. But it wasn't natural. I think Robert poisoned her, made it look like complications. The midwife didn't question it. Neither did the doctor. Rich man's wife dies having a baby. It happens. But Margaret knew. Before she died, she grabbed my hand and made me swear to save Adele. She told me about the deed, about the evidence she'd hidden. She said, "Run," so I did. And they caught you. Outside Pueblo. One of Gage's men. I thought I'd lost them in Denver, but they must have had people watching the roads. Marin touched her side gingerly. He tried to take Adele. I fought. He stabbed me and left me for dead. But I got away in the dark, took a horse, and just ran. I didn't know where, just away. And then the storm came, and the horse threw me, and I saw your barn. Her voice broke entirely. Elias found himself reaching out, taking her hand. It was an instinctive gesture, one he hadn't made in 10 years. "You're safe now," he said. "Both of you. I give you my word." Marin looked up at him, searching his face. "You don't know me. You don't owe me anything. Why would you do this?" Elias was quiet for a moment. "Because you asked," he said finally. "Because that baby didn't ask to be born into this mess. And because—" He paused. "Because it's the right thing to do." It was the simplest answer, the truest one. Marin squeezed his hand. "Thank you." Adele woke then, announcing her hunger with a wail that could wake the dead. Elias found himself smiling despite everything. "That's my cue." He prepared Adele's milk while Marin watched from the bed, and when he carried the baby over, he saw tears streaming down Marin's face. "What's wrong?" he asked, alarmed. "Nothing." Marin brushed at her eyes. "Everything. I didn't think we'd make it. I didn't think I'd see her again. And now here we are, and you're taking care of us like we matter. You do matter." Elias handed Adele to Marin carefully. "Now drink some of this broth. You need your strength back." Over the next week, Marin slowly regained her strength. The fever broke, the wound began to heal, and Elias found himself settling into a routine he'd never expected, caring for a woman and a baby in the house he'd built to be alone in. He taught Marin how to move around the cabin without tearing her stitches. He showed her where everything was, the root cellar, the well, the rifle above the door. He told her the layout of the ranch, where the property lines ran, which neighbors could be trusted and which couldn't. "Why are you telling me all this?" Marin asked one evening as they sat by the fire, Adele sleeping between them. Because you need to know, Elias said. If something happens to me, if Gage or his men show up, you need to be able to get away. There's a horse in the barn named Dancer. She's fast and she's loyal. Take her. There's a trail that runs north behind the ridge. Follow it for 5 miles, and you'll hit the Hendersons' place. They're good people. Tell them I sent you. Nothing's going to happen to you. But Marin's voice was uncertain. Maybe not. But we planned for the worst. Elias leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. Marin, these men, how far will they go? As far as it takes. Her voice was bleak. Robert spent everything on appearances. Big house, fancy parties, political connections. All borrowed money. When Margaret's father's land became hers, it was supposed to save him. But then she had Adele, and suddenly the inheritance was locked up for another generation. Robert can't wait that long. His creditors are circling. If he doesn't pay soon, he'll lose everything, his reputation, his position, maybe even his freedom. He'll kill anyone who stands between him and that land. Then we need to make sure he doesn't find you. How long can we hide? Elias didn't have an answer to that. They established a cover story. If anyone asked, Marin was Elias's widowed cousin from Missouri, come west after her husband died of influenza. The baby was hers. They'd keep to the ranch, avoid town as much as possible, and hope that Gage's search led him elsewhere. It was a thin story, but it was all they had. Days turned into weeks. The wound healed, Marin grew stronger, and slowly, carefully, something shifted between them. Elias found himself looking forward to mornings, when he'd wake to find Marin already up, making coffee with Adele strapped to her chest in a sling she'd fashioned from an old blanket. He taught her to ride, and she was a natural, laughing as Dancer cantered across the meadow. They worked together in the garden, and Marin's hands proved surprisingly skilled at coaxing life from the stubborn Colorado soil. In the evenings, they talked, about everything and nothing. Marin told him about growing up in Denver, about Margaret's laugh and her father's strictness, and the bookshop she'd dreamed of opening. Elias found himself sharing things he'd buried for years, about Sarah, about the fever, about the way grief had carved him hollow and sent him running to this empty land. You still love her, Marin said one night. It wasn't a question. I'll always love her. Elias stared into the fire. But she's gone, and I'm still here. Took me a long time to figure out what to do with that. What did you figure out? That living isn't the same as being alive. He looked at her then. I've been living for 10 years. But these past weeks, this is the first time I felt alive. Marin held his gaze. In the firelight, her eyes looked almost silver. Me too. Adele chose that moment to wake, and the spell broke. But something had been said. Something had shifted. Elias Ward was falling in love, and that terrified him more than any outlaw ever could. It was a sunny morning in early September when everything fell apart. Elias was in the north pasture, mending fence, when he saw the dust cloud on the horizon. Riders, 3, maybe 4, moving fast. His blood turned to ice. He dropped the tools and ran for the house, his boots pounding the earth. Marin! He burst through the door, breathless. Get Adele! Get to the barn, now! Marin was at the table, kneading dough. She took one look at his face and went pale. They're here. I don't know, maybe, but we're not taking chances. Elias grabbed the rifle from above the door, checked the load. Go, hide in the loft. Don't come out until I say it's safe. Elias, go! She went, scooping up Adele and running for the back door. Elias watched her disappear toward the barn, then turned to face the front. Through the window, he could see the riders more clearly now. 4 men on horseback, rough-looking, armed. His stomach dropped. One of them matched Marin's description of Gage Rowden exactly. Elias stepped out onto the porch, rifle held loose and ready. The riders slowed as they approached, spreading out in a loose semicircle. They were all cut from the same cloth, hard men with harder eyes, the kind you found on wanted posters. Gage Rowden was in the center. He was older than Elias expected, maybe 50, with gray-streaked hair and a scar that ran from his temple to his jaw. He smiled when he saw Elias, and it was the smile of a predator. "Morning, friend," Gage called out, reining his horse to a stop 20 feet from the porch. "Beautiful day, isn't it?" State your business, Elias said flatly. Direct. I like that. Gage leaned forward in his saddle. We're looking for someone. A woman, mid-20s, dark hair. She might be traveling with a baby. You seen anyone like that? Can't say I have. You sure? One of the other men, a weasel-faced bastard with a missing front tooth, spoke up. Because we tracked her this far. And tracks don't lie. Tracks lie all the time, Elias said. Deer make tracks, coyotes, lost cattle. You boys are welcome to search the land if you've got a warrant. We don't need a warrant. Gage's smile widened. We're not law. We're just men looking to collect a debt. This woman stole something valuable from our employer. We aim to get it back. The woman or the baby? Gage's eyes narrowed. Smart man. Figured it out, did you? I figure a lot of things. For instance, I figure you're on my land without permission, making threats with no legal authority. I figure that makes you trespassers, and I figure I've got every right to shoot trespassers. Elias raised the rifle slightly, not pointing it. Not yet. Just making sure everyone saw it. The riders shifted, hands moving toward their gun belts. Gage held up a hand, stopping them. Easy, boys. No need for bloodshed. Yet. He looked back at Elias. You're protecting her, aren't you? The woman. Noble. Stupid, but noble. You don't know what you're mixed up in, friend. I know enough. You know there's a fortune at stake? You know the man who hired us has connections all the way to Washington? You know that if you stand in our way, you'll die poor and forgotten on this worthless piece of land? Better than living rich as a baby killer. The words hung in the air like a challenge. Gage's smile vanished. Last chance. Hand over the woman and the child. Walk away. We'll forget we saw you. No. Then you just made a very big mistake. Gage wheeled his horse around, and the four riders galloped away, dust rising in their wake. Elias didn't lower the rifle until they were out of sight. His hands were shaking. When he finally turned and walked to the barn, he found Maran in the loft, clutching Adele to her chest, tears streaming down her face. They found us, she whispered. They found us, and now you're in danger, and I'm so sorry, Elias. I'm so sorry. Elias climbed the ladder and pulled her into his arms, baby and all. You've got nothing to be sorry for. You hear me? Nothing. They'll come back. They'll kill you. Let them try. He pulled back, looking her straight in the eye. Marin, I made you a promise. I'm keeping it, whatever comes. Why? Her voice broke. Why would you die for us? Because I love you, Elias thought. Because in these few short weeks, you and Adele have become the family I never thought I'd have again. Because if I let you go, I lose the only thing that makes me feel alive. But what he said was simpler. Because it's right. And in that moment, with danger circling and the future uncertain, Marin Cole looked at Elias Ward and saw the man he truly was. She kissed him. Quick and desperate and full of fear and hope and everything they hadn't said. When she pulled away, her eyes were shining. We'll fight, she said. Together. Together, Elias agreed. And in the loft of a barn in the middle of nowhere, a cowboy, a woman, and a baby prepared for war. They spent the rest of that day preparing for a siege that might never come, or might come that very night. Elias moved through the tasks with military precision, his mind cataloging every weakness in his defenses, every angle of approach an attacker might use. He'd been a soldier once, a lifetime ago, before Sarah, before Colorado. He'd thought those skills were buried. Turned out you never really forgot how to prepare for men who wanted you dead. He checked every window, every door, every sight line from the surrounding hills. He moved ammunition into the house, positioning rifles at strategic points. He filled every bucket and barrel with water in case they tried fire. He saddled both horses and left them ready in the barn, an escape route if everything went to hell. Maureen watched him work, Adele strapped to her chest, her face pale but determined. Tell me what to do, she said. I can shoot. You ever kill a man? No. Then pray to God you don't have to start today. Elias handed her the smaller rifle anyway, showed her how to load it, how to brace it against her shoulder to absorb the kick. But if they come through that door and I'm down, you aim for center mass and you don't hesitate. You understand? Marin nodded, her jaw set. She understood. By nightfall, the ranch looked the same as always. A simple homestead tucked against the mountains, quiet and unremarkable. But inside it was a fortress. And inside that fortress, 3 people waited. The attack didn't come that night, or the next. Days crawled by in tense silence, every shadow suspect, every sound a potential threat. Elias barely slept, taking watches through the night while Marin rested fitfully with Adele beside her. "Maybe they gave up," Marin said on the 4th morning, though her voice held no conviction. "Maybe." Elias didn't believe it either. Or maybe they're waiting for us to relax. How long can we live like this? As long as we have to. But the truth was gnawing at him. They couldn't stay locked down forever. Winter was coming. He needed supplies from town, flour, salt, ammunition. The cattle needed tending. Life on a ranch didn't stop just because killers were circling. On the 6th day, Elias made a decision. "I'm going to town," he announced at breakfast. "We need supplies and I need to talk to the sheriff." Marin's head snapped up. "You think he'll help? Tom Bridger's a good man, known him 8 years. If I explain what's happening, Robert has connections, Elias. What if they reach this far? What if the sheriff's already been paid to look the other way? Then we need to know that too." Elias reached across the table, covering her hand with his. "We can't fight blind. We need allies, or at least we need to know we don't have any." Marin was quiet for a long moment, her thumb tracing circles on Adele's tiny hand. The baby was awake, staring at the ceiling with that unfocused infant gaze, completely unaware of the danger surrounding her. "What if they're waiting for you to leave?" Marin asked finally. "What if they want you gone so they can take us?" "That's why you're not staying here." Elias had been planning this all night. "You're coming with me, both of you. We tell people the cover story. You're my cousin, newly widowed, come to help with the ranch. It's what we should have done from the start, hide in plain sight." "That's insane." "It's survival." Elias leaned forward. "Marin, they already know you're here. Gage made that clear, so we don't hide like criminals. We walk into town bold as brass, show everyone there's nothing suspicious about a man with his cousin and her baby. Make it normal. Make it boring. And while we're there, I talk to Tom, see what he knows, see if he can help." Marin looked terrified and unconvinced in equal measure, but after a moment she nodded. "All right, when? Tomorrow. Early, before the heat sets in." He squeezed her hand. "It's going to be all right." He wished he believed that. They left at dawn, the wagon rattling over the rough road toward Crowley Ridge. It was a 2-hour journey, and Elias drove it with every sense on high alert, his rifle across his knees, his eyes constantly scanning the horizon. Marin sat beside him in a borrowed dress, one of Sarah's, pulled from a trunk Elias hadn't opened in a decade. It fit her reasonably well, though it was a little loose in the shoulders. She'd pinned her hair up in a simple style and held Adele wrapped in a clean blanket. To any casual observer, they looked exactly like what they claimed to be. Family. "Tell me about the town," Marin said as the first buildings came into view. "Who should I watch out for?" "Most folks are decent. The blacksmith, Henry Cole, no relation to you, far as I know. He's a gossip, but harmless. Martha Hendricks runs the general store. She's kind, but she'll ask 1,000 questions. Just stick to the story." Elias paused. "Doc Wilson's the one to avoid. He drinks, and when he drinks, he talks. We don't want him talking about a woman with a knife wound showing up in my house." "Anyone else?" "Yeah." Elias's jaw tightened. "Silas Thorne. Runs the saloon and half the gambling debts in the county. He's got connections to some rough people. If anyone in town is on Robert Kane's payroll, it'd be him." Marin paled slightly, but nodded. Crowley Ridge wasn't much of a town, 24 buildings clustered around a main street, serving the scattered ranches and homesteads of the valley. On a Thursday morning in early September, it was sleepy and quiet, with only a handful of people visible. Elias pulled the wagon up in front of the general store and set the brake. "Ready?" "No." Marin took a deep breath. "But let's do it anyway." Martha Hendricks was sweeping the porch when they walked up, and her eyes went wide as saucers. "Elias Ward, as I live and breathe, I haven't seen you in town since June, and now here you are with, oh my stars, is that a baby?" "Morning, Martha." Elias tipped his hat. "I'd like you to meet my cousin,
Marin Ward. She's come from Missouri to stay with me for a spell. Marin, this is Martha Hendricks. She runs the best store in 3 counties. The only store in 3 counties, Martha said, but she was beaming. She bustled over to Marin, peering at Adele with the focused interest of a woman who loved babies more than gossip, though she loved gossip plenty. Oh, she's precious. How old? 3 weeks, Marin said, and Elias was impressed by how steady her voice was. Her name's Adele. Such a little darling, and you poor dear, traveling all this way with a newborn. Your husband must be beside himself with worry. My husband passed, Marin said quietly. Influenza, back in July.
Martha's face crumpled with sympathy.
Oh, you poor lamb. No wonder you came west. Family's important at times like these. She reached out and patted Marin's arm. Well, you're in good hands with Elias. He's the finest man in this valley, even if he is too stubborn and solitary for his own good. I'm standing right here, Martha. I know, dear. That's why I said it. Martha winked at Marin. Now, what can I get for you folks? They spent 20 minutes in the store, filling their order while Martha chatted ceaselessly about town news. Marin played her part perfectly, asking polite questions, admiring Martha's collection of fabrics, letting the older woman hold Adele while she examined a set of baby clothes. You should come to the church social next week, Martha said, as Elias loaded supplies into the wagon. It's not much, but it's a chance to meet people. Lord knows Elias could use more socializing. We'll think about it, Marin said with a smile that looked almost genuine. They were loading the last crate when Elias saw Sheriff Tom Bridger walking up the street. Tom was in his 50s, weather-beaten and solid, with sharp eyes that missed nothing. He'd been sheriff for 15 years, and he ran a fair, if firm, jurisdiction. Elias, Tom tipped his hat. Heard you had company. Thought I'd come say hello. Tom, this is my cousin Marin. Marin, Sheriff Bridger. They shook hands. Tom's gaze lingered on Marin for a moment, assessing, not suspicious, just careful. Pleasure, ma'am. Sorry for your loss. Thank you, Sheriff. How long you planning to stay? That depends, Marin said carefully. I'm not in a hurry to go back to Missouri. Too many memories. Tom nodded, understanding. Then he looked at Elias. Got a minute? Need to talk to you about something. Elias's pulse kicked up, but he kept his expression neutral. Sure.
Marin, why don't you wait in the wagon?
She nodded and moved away, taking Adele with her.
Tom watched her go, then turned to Elias, his voice dropping low. You want to tell me what's really going on? Elias felt ice slide down his spine. What do you mean? I mean, 4 rough-looking men rode through here 5 days ago, asking questions about a woman with a baby. Said she was a thief, and they were hired to bring her back to Denver. Said she might be hiding on one of the outlying ranches. Tom's eyes were hard. I told them I hadn't seen anyone matching that description, and I suggested they move along before I arrested them for disturbing the peace. They left. But Elias, if you're mixed up in something, I'm not mixed up in anything illegal. Then what's going on? Because that woman in the wagon, she's the one they're looking for, isn't she? Elias hesitated. Every instinct told him to lie, to deny, to protect Marin at all costs. But Tom Bridger wasn't a fool, and more than that, he was honest. If there was one person in this town who might help, it was him. Can we talk somewhere private? Tom gestured to his office across the street. After you. Elias told Marin to stay with the wagon, promised he'd be right back, and followed Tom into the small, cluttered office that served as both sheriff's station and makeshift jail. Tom closed the door and leaned against his desk, arms crossed. Talk. So Elias talked. He told Tom everything, finding Marin bleeding in the barn, the story about Robert Kane and the inheritance, the evidence hidden in the deed, Gage Rowden and his men showing up at the ranch. He kept his voice low and factual, but he didn't hide the stakes. When he finished, Tom was quiet for a long moment, his jaw working. You got proof of any of this? I've got the papers, the deed, the birth certificate, Margaret's letter. Marin's willing to testify. Against a rich man in Denver with political connections. Tom shook his head. Elias, you know how this works. Men like Robert Kane don't go down easy. They've got lawyers, judges in their pockets. Even if everything Marin says is true, it is true. Even if it is, Proving it in court is damn near impossible. And in the meantime, you're sitting on your ranch with a target on your back, protecting a woman and a baby from hired killers. Tom pushed off the desk, running a hand through his graying hair. Jesus, Elias, what were you thinking? I was thinking that baby deserves to live. She does, but you deserve to live too. Tom sighed. Look, I'll do what I can. I'll write to the marshal in Denver, see if there are any open warrants on Gage Rowden or his crew. If I can arrest them on other charges, that might buy you time, but I'm one man in a small town. I can't take on an army. I'm not asking you to. I'm just asking you to be ready. If something happens, if they come at us, I need to know the law is going to back us up. Tom looked him straight in the eye. If they attack you on your land, you've got every right to defend yourself. And if you send word, I'll come with as many deputies as I can round up. But Elias, don't let it get to that point if you can help it. Because once bullets start flying, good people die. You understand? I understand. Tom walked him to the door. One more thing. Be careful who you trust in this town. There's been talk about Silas Thorne making deals with some unsavory types from Denver. I don't have proof, but I've got instincts. If Kane's got connections here, they run through Silas. Elias nodded grimly. Thanks, Tom. Watch your back. When Elias returned to the wagon, Marin took one look at his face and knew. He believes us? Yeah, but he can't do much unless they move against us first. Elias climbed up beside her, taking the reins. We're on our own for now. We've always been on our own. They started the journey back, the wagon creaking under the weight of supplies. They were halfway home when Marin spoke again. That kiss, in the barn, after Gage came. Did you mean it? Elias kept his eyes on the road. You kissed me, if I recall. Don't dodge the question. He was quiet for a long moment, choosing his words carefully. 10 years ago, I buried my wife. I told myself I was done, that I'd used up my chance at family, at happiness, and it was time to just exist. And I did. I existed. He glanced at her. Then you showed up, bleeding in my barn, holding a baby and begging me to save her. And every day since you've reminded me that existing isn't the same as living. Marin's breath caught. Elias, I'm not good with words, Marin. Never have been. But yeah, I meant it. Every bit of it. And if we survive this, if we get through to the other side, I'm going to ask you properly. Because you and Adele, you're the family I never thought I'd have again. And I'll be damned if I lose you to some bastard from Denver who thinks money buys him the right to kill. Tears were streaming down Marin's face now, but she was smiling. You're wrong about one thing. What's that? You're very good with words. He reached over and took her hand, and they rode the rest of the way home in silence, fingers intertwined, while Adele slept between them. The next 2 weeks passed in a strange, suspended peace. No sign of Gage or his men, no attacks, no threats, no riders on the horizon. It would have been easy to believe the danger had passed, that they'd given up and moved on to easier prey. Elias didn't believe it for a second. He continued to keep watch at night, continued to sleep light with the rifle close. But during the days, life on the ranch went on. Cattle needed tending, fences needed mending, hay needed cutting before winter. And Marin learned the rhythms of ranch life. She was a natural, picking up skills with a speed that surprised both of them. Elias taught her to milk the cow, and within a week she was faster at it than he was. He showed her how to mend tack, and soon she was repairing his old saddle with neat, careful stitches. She learned to read the weather, to spot a lame horse, to tell when the cattle were restless. You sure you grew up in Denver? Elias asked one afternoon, watching her gentle, a skittish calf with practiced ease. My father had a farm outside the city when I was young, Marin said, stroking the calf's neck. We moved to Denver when I was 12, after he made his money. But I remember. Some things you don't forget. They fell into routines. Mornings, Elias would wake early and start the fire while Marin fed Adele. They'd have coffee together as the sun rose, planning the day's work. Afternoons were for labor, hard, honest work that left them both exhausted but satisfied. Evenings were for rest, for simple meals and quiet conversation, while Adele dozed in her makeshift cradle.
It felt like a real life, a real family, and that terrified Elias almost as much as the threat hanging over them. "You're thinking too loud," Maureen said one evening. They were sitting on the porch, watching the sunset paint the mountains gold and crimson. Adele was asleep inside, and for once, the world was peaceful. Just wondering when the other shoe's going to drop. Maybe it won't. Maybe they really did give up. "You believe that?" Marin was quiet. "No," she admitted. "But I want to. I want to believe we could just stay like this, build a life, be happy. We can. Can we?" She turned to look at him. "Elias, even if we survive Gage, even if we somehow stop Robert Kane, what then? I'm not really your cousin. Adele's not really my daughter. We're living a lie." "Then we make it the truth." Elias stood, pacing to the porch rail. "Marry me, Marin." She stared at him. "What?" "Marry me. Not because we have to, not because it makes the story more believable. Marry me because I love you, because I love Adele, because I want to wake up every morning for the rest of my life and see your face." He turned to face her fully. "I know it's fast, I know it's crazy, but nothing about this situation is normal, and I'm done pretending I don't feel what I feel." Marin stood slowly, crossing to him. "You love me?" "More than I thought I could love anyone again." "I love you too." She said it simply, like it was the most obvious thing in the world. "I have for weeks. I just didn't think. I didn't know if you—" He kissed her then, properly this time, not desperate and rushed like in the barn, but slow and thorough and full of promise. When they broke apart, both of them were breathing hard. "Is that a yes?" Elias asked. "That's a yes." They stood there on the porch, wrapped in each other's arms as the sun set and the stars began to emerge, two people who'd found each other in the worst circumstances imaginable and decided to choose hope anyway. Inside, Adele stirred and began to cry. Marin laughed, pulling away. "Duty calls. I'll get her." Elias headed inside, scooping up the baby with a gentleness that still surprised him. Adele's crying stopped immediately, replaced by that unfocused baby stare. "Hey there, little one. Guess what? I'm going to be your papa. What do you think about that?" Adele yawned. "I'll take that as approval." The attack came 2 nights later. Elias woke to the smell of smoke. He was on his feet instantly, rifle in hand, mind racing. The smoke was thick, acrid, coming from outside. Through the window, he could see orange light dancing against the night sky. The barn was on fire. "Marin!" He was moving even as he shouted, grabbing her shoulder and shaking her awake. "Get Adele! Get to the root cellar! Now!" She woke fast, years of running having trained her to go from sleep to alert in seconds. "What's happening?" "They're here! Go!" Marin snatched Adele from the cradle and ran for the back of the house, where a trapdoor led to the root cellar, the safest, most hidden place on the property. Elias heard the door bang shut, heard the bolt slide home, and only then did he turn his attention to the front. Through the window, he could see figures moving in the firelight. 4, maybe 5. They'd set the barn ablaze, and now they were fanning out, surrounding the house. Elias doused the lantern, plunging the room into darkness. He moved to the window, staying low, rifle ready. His heart was hammering, but his hands were steady. This was what he'd prepared for. A voice called out from the darkness. "Gage! Ward! I know you're in there! Send out the woman and the baby, and we'll let you live!" Elias didn't answer. Talking was a trap, a distraction. He scanned the shadows, looking for targets. "Don't be a fool," Gage shouted. "You can't win this. There's 5 of us and 1 of you. This ends one way. Either you hand them over, or we burn you out and take them from the ashes." Still, Elias said nothing. He saw movement to the left, one of Gage's men creeping toward the house. Elias tracked him through the rifle's sight, waiting. The man stepped into a patch of firelight. Elias fired. The shot cracked through the night like thunder, and the man went down, screaming and clutching his leg. Not a kill shot. Elias had aimed low deliberately, but the message was clear. "Next one's through the heart," Elias shouted. "Get off my land." "Big mistake, Ward,"
Gage's voice was furious now. "Boys, light it up!" Glass shattered as something crashed through the front window. A bottle, wrapped in burning cloth. It hit the floor and exploded in flame, oil spreading across the wooden planks. Elias cursed, stomping at the fire even as he kept the rifle trained on the window. Another bottle came through, then another. The room was filling with smoke, heat building rapidly. He couldn't stay here. The house was becoming a death trap. "Marin!" He ran to the trap door, yanking it open. "We have to go, now!" She emerged from the cellar. Adele clutched to her chest, eyes wide with terror. "The barn is gone. We're going for the horses in the north pasture. Can you run?" "I can run." "Then run." They burst out the back door into chaos. The barn was fully engulfed now, flames reaching 50 feet into the air, painting the night in shades of hell. The horses in the north pasture were panicking, rearing and screaming. Elias saw two of Gage's men coming around the side of the house and fired twice. One went down. The other dove for cover. "Go! Go! Go!" He pushed Marin ahead of him, providing covering fire as they ran for the pasture. Bullets cracked past them, too close, kicking up dirt. Marin stumbled but didn't fall, holding Adele tight, running like her life depended on it, because it did. They reached the fence. Elias grabbed Dancer's halter. The horse was terrified but responded to his voice. He all but threw Marin onto the mare's back, handed her Adele, then vaulted up behind her. "Hold on!" He kicked Dancer hard, and the horse bolted. They galloped into the darkness, away from the burning ranch, into the hills. Behind them, Elias could hear shouting, could hear horses being mounted for pursuit. "They're coming!" Marin shouted over the thunder of hooves. "I know! Hold tight!" Elias guided Dancer through the darkness by memory and moonlight, following trails he'd ridden 1,000 times. The mare was sure-footed and fast, fear giving her speed. But Gage's men knew these hills too, and they were gaining. A shot rang out, close enough that Elias felt the wind of the bullet passing. He leaned low over Marin and Adele, making them as small a target as possible, and urged Dancer faster. They crested a ridge and plunged down the far side, into a ravine Elias knew well. There was a narrow trail here, barely wide enough for a single horse, overgrown with brush. He steered Dancer into it, branches whipping past, and prayed the darkness would hide them. Behind them, the pursuit thundered past the mouth of the ravine, missing the turn. Elias brought Dancer to a halt, breathing hard, listening. He could hear the riders moving away, could hear them shouting to each other, confused, searching. Marin was shaking in his arms. Adele was crying, thin, terrified wails that would give them away if anyone came close. "Shh, baby, shh," Marin whispered, rocking her gently. "Please, Adele, please be quiet." Miraculously, the baby quieted, as if she understood the danger. They waited in the darkness for what felt like hours, but was probably only 20 minutes. Finally, the sounds of pursuit faded into the distance. Elias let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. "We need to keep moving. They'll double back eventually." "Where do we go?" "The Hendersons. Like I told you, 5 miles north. We'll be safe there." They rode through the night, slow and careful now, avoiding open ground. Twice they heard riders in the distance and had to hide in the trees until they passed. By the time they reached the Hendersons' ranch, the eastern sky was beginning to lighten with dawn. Frank and Sarah Henderson were old friends, good people who'd helped Elias through Sarah's death and asked nothing in return. When Elias pounded on their door at dawn, Frank opened it with a shotgun in hand, then lowered it immediately when he saw who it was. "Elias, what in God's name?" "We need help, Frank. Men are hunting us. They burned my ranch. We need a place to hide, just for a day or two until—" "Get inside." Frank pulled the door wide, ushering them in. Sarah, we've got company." Sarah Henderson emerged from the bedroom, tying her robe, and took one look at Marin holding the crying baby and went straight into action. "You poor dears. Frank, get water heating. Elias, there's coffee in the pot. Ma'am, let me take that baby and you sit down before you fall down." For the first time since the fire started, Elias felt the adrenaline drain away, replaced by bone-deep exhaustion. They were safe. For now. But as he sat at the Hendersons' kitchen table, drinking bitter coffee and watching Marin feed Adele with shaking hands, he knew this wasn't over. Gage Rowden had declared war, and Elias Ward was going to finish it. Frank Henderson sat across from Elias at the kitchen table, his weathered face grave in the lamplight. Outside, the sun was just beginning to crest the mountains, painting the world in shades of gold and shadow. Sarah had taken Maureen and Adele to the back bedroom to rest, and for the first time since the fire, Elias could hear himself think. "Tell me everything," Frank said quietly. So Elias did. He laid it all out. Marin's arrival, the inheritance, Robert Kane's plot, Gage Rowden, and his men. He didn't hold anything back. Frank and Sarah deserved the truth, especially now that he was bringing danger to their doorstep. When he finished, Frank was quiet for a long moment, his calloused hands wrapped around a coffee cup. "That's a hell of a situation you're in, son." "I know, and I know I'm asking a lot. You're not asking anything. You needed help, so you came here. That's what neighbors do." Frank leaned forward. "But Elias, you can't fight this alone."
5 armed men hunting a woman and child. That's beyond what one rancher can handle, even one as stubborn as you.
"I sent for Tom Bridger last night. Sent one of your ranch hands into town with a message before dawn. He should be here by noon." Frank nodded approval. "Good. Tom's got authority, and he's not afraid to use it. But even with the sheriff, you're outgunned. Gage Rowden's got a reputation. He's not the kind to give up just because the law shows up." "I'm counting on that." Frank's eyebrows rose. "Come again?" "Gage wants that baby. He needs her dead to collect from Kane. He's not going to stop until he gets what he's after, or until he's in the ground." Elias met Frank's eyes steadily. "So we give him what he wants. We draw him out into the open, where Tom can take him down legally." "You're talking about using Marin and the baby as bait." "I'm talking about ending this before more people get hurt." Elias's jaw was set. "My ranch is gone, Frank. Everything I built over 10 years, burned to ash. And Gage will do the same to anyone who shelters us. He'll burn this place too if he finds out we're here. I won't let that happen." "So what's your plan?" "We go back, to my land, today. We make camp in the ruins where Gage can find us. And when he comes, because he will come, Tom and his deputies will be waiting in the hills. We catch him red-handed, in the act, with witnesses. Then it's not just Tom's word against Kane's money, it's attempted murder with evidence." Frank whistled low. "That's either brilliant or suicidal. I'm not sure which." "Maybe both." Elias drained his coffee. "But it's the only way to end this. Gage has to be stopped, and he has to be stopped in a way that can't be bought off or covered up. If we run, he'll follow. If we hide, he'll find us. So we stand and fight on ground of our choosing, with the law on our side. And if something goes wrong, if Gage gets past Tom's deputies, then I kill him myself." Elias said it flatly, with no bravado, just cold certainty. "I won't let him touch Marin or Adele, whatever it takes." Frank studied him for a long moment. "You love her, the woman." It wasn't a question, but Elias answered anyway. "Yes." "And the baby?" "She's mine now, in every way that matters." Frank nodded slowly, understanding passing between them without need for more words. "All right. I'll help however I can. But Elias, you make damn sure Tom Bridger and his men are in position before you let Gage anywhere near that camp. Because if this goes wrong, you're not just risking your life, you're risking theirs too." "I know." The bedroom door opened and Sarah emerged, her face drawn with worry. "Marin's asleep, but she's exhausted. That poor girl's been running on fear and adrenaline for so long, I don't think she remembers what rest feels like. And the baby?" Sarah shook her head. 3 weeks old and already her life's in danger. It's not right." "No, it's not," Elias agreed. "That's why we're going to fix it." Sarah looked between her husband and Elias, reading the determination in both their faces. "You're planning something." "We're planning to end this," Frank said. "Today." Sheriff Tom Bridger arrived just before noon, riding hard with 2 deputies, young men named Carter and Mills, who Elias knew by sight. Tom's face was grim as he dismounted. "Your ranch hand said there was trouble. Didn't say how much." Tom looked at Elias's soot-stained clothes, the burns on his hands from fighting the fire. "How bad?"
Barn's gone. House too, probably. They tried to burn us out last night. Tom's expression darkened. Anyone hurt? I winged one of theirs. We got away clean. Elias gestured toward the house. Marin and the baby are inside, safe for now. For now. Tom spat into the dirt. Elias, this has gone beyond a property dispute. This is attempted murder, multiple counts. I can get warrants for Gage and his whole crew. Warrants don't mean anything if you can't serve them, and Gage is smart enough to stay out of town where you've got jurisdiction. Elias outlined his plan, returning to the ranch, setting a trap, catching Gage in the act. Tom listened without interrupting, his face unreadable. When Elias finished, the sheriff was quiet for a long moment. It's risky, Tom said finally. A lot of things could go wrong. You have a better idea? Run. Take Marin and the baby and disappear. Change your names. Start over somewhere Kane's reach doesn't extend. And spend the rest of our lives looking over our shoulders, wondering when they'll find us? No. Elias shook his head. This ends here, Tom, one way or another. Tom sighed, removing his hat and running a hand through his graying hair. All right, we do it your way. But I'm calling in every favor I've got. By tonight, I'll have 6 men in those hills, all armed, all ready. Gage makes a move, we take him down hard and legal. That's all I'm asking. You're asking a hell of a lot more than that, and we both know it. Tom clapped him on the shoulder. But you're right, this needs to end. So let's end it. They spent the afternoon preparing. Tom sent his deputies to round up volunteers, ranchers and townsmen who could shoot straight and wouldn't ask too many questions. Frank contributed 2 of his own ranch hands, men who'd known Elias for years and owed him favors. By the time the sun started its descent toward the mountains, they had 8 men ready to ride. Marin woke just as they were preparing to leave. She emerged from the bedroom with Adele in her arms, her face pale but determined. You're going back, she said. It wasn't a question. We are, Elias corrected. All 3 of us. But you'll be protected, Marin. Tom's got men who'll be watching from the hills the moment Gage shows himself. He'll kill you. Marin's voice was flat. That's what you're not saying. You're betting he'll come after us before Tom's men can stop him. You're betting you can hold him off long enough for help to arrive. And if you're wrong, I'm not wrong. You can't know that. Her composure cracked, fear and anger bleeding through. Elias, you've done enough. You've saved us twice already. You don't have to do this. Yes, I do. He crossed to her, taking her face gently in his hands. Marin, if we run, this never ends. Kane will keep sending men. Gage will keep hunting. Maybe they catch us in a month, maybe a year, but eventually they will. And next time, there might not be a barn to hide in or friends to run to. He pressed his forehead to hers. This is the only way. I can't lose you. Her voice broke. I just found you. I can't. You won't. I promise you won't. He kissed her forehead, her cheeks, finally her lips. Trust me. I do trust you. That's what terrifies me. Adele began to fuss, and Marin pulled back, rocking the baby gently. Sarah Henderson appeared beside them, with a basket packed with food and supplies. For the road, Sarah said softly. And Marin, dear, you're braver than you know. That little girl is lucky to have you. I'm lucky to have her. Marin's voice was thick with unshed tears. All of you, I never expected... She couldn't finish. I know, dear, I know. Sarah embraced her carefully, mindful of the baby between them. You bring them back safe, Elias Ward. You hear me? Yes, ma'am. They rode out as the sun touched the mountain peaks, painting the sky in shades of fire. Elias led with Marin behind him on Dancer, Adele secured in a sling against her chest. Tom and his men spread out in a loose formation, some riding openly, others peeling off to take positions in the hills. The plan was simple. They'd make camp in the ruins of Elias's ranch, visible and vulnerable. Tom's men would be hidden in the surrounding ridges, watching, waiting. When Gage came, and everyone agreed he would come, they'd let him get close enough to make his intentions clear. Then Tom would move in with overwhelming force, arrest Gage and his men on charges that would stick even in a Denver courtroom. Simple. But as Elias knew from his army days, simple plans had a way of becoming complicated the moment the shooting started.
They reached the ranch as twilight fell. The sight of it hit Elias like a fist to the gut. The barn was a skeleton of charred timbers, still smoking in places. The house was worse. The roof had collapsed, the walls were blackened ruins, and everything he'd owned was either ash or melted slag. 10 years of his life, gone.
Oh, Elias. Marin's voice was soft with grief. I'm so sorry. It's just wood and nails. His voice was rougher than he intended. We'll rebuild. If we survive, he didn't say. But Marin heard it anyway.
They made camp in the open space between the ruined buildings, building a fire that would be visible for miles. Tom's men melted into the darkness, taking positions with clear sight lines to the camp. Carter was on the north ridge. Mills was hidden in the rocks to the east. Frank's ranch hands covered the south approach. Tom himself took a position in the ruins of the barn, where he could see everything. Elias checked and rechecked his rifle, his pistol, the knife at his belt. He inventoried their ammunition, their escape routes, every possible angle of attack. Marin watched him work, holding Adele close. When they come, she said quietly, what do you need me to do? Stay behind me. Keep Adele quiet if you can. And if I tell you to run, I won't leave you. Marin, I won't. Her eyes flashed in the firelight. We survive this together or not at all. He wanted to argue, wanted to make her promise to take Adele and run if things went bad. But he looked at her face and saw the same stubborn determination he felt in his own chest. She wasn't going to back down. Together, then, he said. They waited. The night deepened, stars appearing one by one in the vast Colorado sky. The fire crackled and popped. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote called. Adele slept in Marin's arms, blissfully unaware of the danger gathering in the darkness. Tell me about Sarah, Marin said suddenly. Your wife. You never talk about her. Elias was quiet for a moment. What do you want to know? Everything. What she was like, how you met, why you loved her. Why now? Because if tonight goes wrong, I want to know the man I'm fighting beside. All of him. Even the parts that hurt. So Elias told her about meeting Sarah at a church social in Kansas, about how she'd laughed at his terrible dancing and agreed to marry him anyway, about the homestead they'd built together, the dreams they'd shared, the quiet happiness of their 5 years together, about the fever that took her in 3 days, leaving him with nothing but grief and a grave he couldn't bear to visit. She would have liked you, Elias said. Sarah always said I needed someone who could match my stubborn streak. Someone who wouldn't let me hide from the world. I'm not trying to replace her. I know, and that's not what this is. He reached over, taking Marin's hand. Sarah was my first love. But Marin, you're my second chance, and that's just as precious. She squeezed his hand, tears glinting in her eyes. When this is over, we're getting married. Proper church wedding with Frank and Sarah and everyone who'll come. And then we're rebuilding this ranch together, all 3 of us. Adele's going to grow up here, safe and loved and free from the shadow of Robert Kane. Promise me. I promise. They heard the horses at midnight. Elias was on his feet instantly, rifle in hand. Marin scrambled up, holding Adele tight. From his position in the barn ruins, Tom gave a low whistle. 3 short notes. The signal. They were coming. 5 riders emerged from the darkness, moving slowly, cautiously. Even in the dim firelight, Elias recognized Gage Rowden's silhouette. The outlaw sat his horse like a man who'd spent his life in the saddle, comfortable with violence, confident in his ability to deliver it. They stopped 50 feet from the camp, far enough that a rifle shot might miss in the darkness, close enough that Elias could see Gage's scarred face in the firelight. "Evening, Ward," Gage called out. "Hell of a mess you've got here. Shame about the ranch." Elias didn't answer. Let Gage do the talking. Every word was evidence. "See, you've still got the woman and the brat. That's unfortunate. I was hoping you'd come to your senses, realize this isn't your fight." Gage leaned forward in his saddle. "Last chance, Ward. Hand them over. Walk away. Live to rebuild." "Go to hell, Gage." Gage sighed, almost theatrically. "I was afraid you'd say that." "Boys?" The other 4 riders spread out, forming a loose semicircle.
Elias recognized the weasel-faced man from the first encounter, now sporting a fresh bandage on his arm. 2 others were new, hard men with dead eyes. The fourth was barely more than a boy, maybe 20, with a nervous energy that suggested this was his first real job. "Here's how this is going to work," Gage continued. "You're going to put down that rifle. Then you're going to step away from the woman. My boys are going to take her and the baby, nice and quiet. And then you're going to forget you ever saw any of us. Because if you don't—" He drew his pistol, letting the firelight glint off the barrel. "Well, accidents happen on lonely ranches." "That's a threat against my life, Gage. In front of witnesses." Elias kept his voice steady. "You sure you want to say that out loud?" "What witnesses? I see a broken-down rancher, a scared woman, and a baby. No law for 20 miles, no help coming." Gage smiled. "Just us and the dark." From the darkness came Tom Bridger's voice, sharp and authoritative. "That's where you're wrong, Gage." 8 men stepped into the firelight, rifles raised. Tom was in the center, his badge glinting. The deputies flanked him, and Frank's ranch hands filled in the gaps. They'd moved silent as ghosts, surrounding Gage's men without a sound. "Sheriff?" Gage's smile didn't waver, but Elias saw his hand tighten on his pistol. "This is a private matter." "Murder's not a private matter. Neither is kidnapping. Neither is arson." Tom's voice was hard as iron. "Gage Rowden, you and your men are under arrest. Attempted murder, conspiracy to commit murder, arson, terroristic threats. I could go on. Drop your weapons. Now." For a frozen moment, nobody moved. The only sound was the fire crackling and Adele's soft breathing. Elias could feel the tension like a physical weight, could see the calculation happening behind Gage's eyes. Then Gage laughed. "You think Denver's going to let you arrest me? You think Robert Kane doesn't have judges in his pocket? Sheriff, you're about to make a very powerful enemy." "Already made him." Tom raised his rifle to his shoulder. "I said drop your weapons." The young rider moved first, panic overriding judgment. His hand darted for his gun. 3 rifles barked at once. The boy spun from his saddle and hit the ground hard, clutching his shoulder, screaming. His horse bolted, disappearing into the night. "Anyone else?" Tom's voice was steady, but his eyes were deadly serious. The weasel-faced man threw his pistol down, hands raised. One of the hard-eyed men followed suit, but the fourth, the largest of them, a brute with arms like tree trunks, spurred his horse directly at the fire, directly at Marin. Elias fired without thinking. The shot took the man in the chest, punching him backward off his horse. The animal reared, screaming, then galloped away. The man didn't move again, and Gage used the chaos to draw and fire. The shot went wide, missing Tom by inches. Tom returned fire, as did 3 of his deputies. Bullets tore through the night. Gage's horse reared, and the outlaw tumbled from the saddle, hitting the ground rolling. He came up shooting, firing wildly. A bullet whined past Elias's ear. Another kicked up dirt at Marin's feet. She screamed, diving to the ground, curling her body around Adele. Elias stepped between them and Gage, rifle steady. "It's over, Gage!" "Not yet." Gage's face was twisted with rage. He was wounded. Elias could see blood spreading across his left side, but he was still moving, still dangerous. He swung his pistol toward Marin. Elias didn't hesitate. He fired once, center mass, the shot echoing across the ruins of his ranch. Gage staggered backward, the pistol falling from his hand. He looked down at the spreading red stain on his chest, then up at Elias, surprise written across his face. "Should have took the deal," Gage whispered. Then his legs gave out, and he collapsed. The silence that followed was deafening. Tom approached Gage carefully, kicking away the fallen pistol. He checked for a pulse, then looked up at Elias and shook his head. "He's gone." Elias lowered his rifle slowly, his hands shaking now that the adrenaline was fading. He turned to find Marin on the ground, still curled around Adele, her eyes wide with shock. "Are you hurt?" He dropped to his knees beside her, running his hands over her, checking for wounds. "Marin, talk to me. Are you hurt?" "I'm fine. We're fine." Her voice was thin but steady. "Is it over?" "It's over." Tom and his deputies rounded up the surviving men, 3 in total, the boy with the wounded shoulder and 2 who'd surrendered immediately. They zip-tied their hands and herded them together,
reading out charges that would keep them locked up for years. Carter found papers on Gage's body, letters from Robert Kane detailing the job, promising payment, explicitly ordering Adele's death. Evidence, undeniable, written evidence of conspiracy to murder. "This is it," Tom said, holding the letters up to the firelight. "This is enough to bring Kane down. Murder for hire, conspiracy, all of it. Even his money won't save him from this." Elias helped Marin to her feet, checking on Adele. The baby was crying now, loud, furious wails that somehow sounded more like life than fear. Marin was crying too, silent tears streaming down her face as she rocked her sister's child. "It's really over?" she asked again, as if she couldn't quite believe it. "It's really over," Elias confirmed. He pulled her close, wrapping both of them in his arms. "You're safe. Adele's safe. Kane's going to pay for what he did to Margaret." Tom approached, his expression a mixture of satisfaction and exhaustion. "We'll take these men into town tonight, lock them up. I'll wire the marshal in Denver first thing in the morning with the evidence. Kane will be arrested by the end of the week." "Thank you, Tom." Elias extended his hand. "For believing us. For coming." Tom shook it firmly. "It's my job, but Elias—" He glanced at the bodies being covered with blankets. "You did what you had to do. Don't carry that weight if you don't have to." "I won't." And Elias meant it. He'd killed Gage Rowden to protect his family. There was no guilt in that, only grim necessity. Frank Henderson emerged from the darkness, his rifle slung over his shoulder. "Hell of a night." "Hell of a plan," Elias countered. "It worked. That's what matters." Frank looked around at the ruins of the ranch. "You'll need a place to stay while you rebuild. Sarah and I insist you come back with us. All three of you. Stay as long as you need." "Frank, we couldn't—" "You could, and you will. That's what neighbors do, Elias. We look after each other." Frank clapped him on the shoulder. "Besides, Sarah's already planning where to put the cradle." Marin laughed, a slightly hysterical sound that turned into a sob. "Thank you. Thank you all." They loaded up the prisoners and the dead, preparing for the ride back. Carter and Mills would escort the survivors to the jail in town. Tom would accompany them, starting the process of bringing formal charges. Frank's ranch hands would help transport the bodies to the undertaker, and Elias, Marin, and Adele would ride back to the Henderson ranch, where Sarah would fuss over them and feed them hot food and give them a place to rest while the world slowly returned to normal. As they prepared to leave, Elias took one last look at the ruins of his ranch. Everything he'd built was gone, reduced to ash and memory. But standing there with Marin beside him and Adele in her arms, he realized he didn't feel the grief he'd expected. "We'll rebuild," Marin said softly, following his gaze. "Better than before." "With a bigger house," Elias agreed. "One with a nursery, maybe two, if we're planning ahead." She looked at him, surprise and hope warring on her face. "You want more children?" "I want a future. With you. With however many kids we're blessed with." He pulled her close. "I want noise and chaos and laughter. I want to fill that house with life." "Then that's what we'll do." Marin leaned into him, exhausted but smiling. "After we get married." "After we get married," he agreed. They rode away from the ruins as the first light of dawn touched the mountains, painting the world in shades of gold and promise. Behind them, the ashes cooled. Ahead, the future waited, uncertain, but theirs to build. And for the first time in 10 years, Elias Ward felt something he'd thought lost forever. He felt hope. The telegram arrived at the Henderson Ranch 3 days later. Elias was in the barn helping Frank repair a broken wagon wheel when Sarah came running across the yard, waving a yellow envelope. Her face was flushed with excitement, and even from a distance, Elias could see her hands trembling. "It's from Tom," she called out. "News from Denver." Elias dropped the hammer and ran to meet her, Frank close behind. Marin emerged from the house with Adele, moving faster than she should have given her still-healing wound, her face pale with anticipation and fear. Sarah thrust the telegram into Elias's hands. Read it out loud." Elias unfolded the paper, his heart hammering. The message was brief, written in Tom Bridger's economical style. "Robert Kane arrested this morning, stop charged with conspiracy to commit murder. Stop evidence from Gage's letters, plus testimony from captured men." Stop Kane's assets frozen pending trial. Stop. Guardianship of Adele. Kane granted to Marin Cole. Stop. You're clear. Stop. Coming home tomorrow. Stop, Tom. The silence that followed stretched for 3 heartbeats. Then Marin let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob, and buried her face against Adele's dark hair. Sarah wrapped her arms around both of them, crying openly. Frank let out a whoop and clapped Elias so hard on the back he nearly knocked him over. "It's done," Marin whispered, looking up at Elias with eyes that shone like silver. "It's really done. Robert can't hurt her anymore. He can't hurt anyone." "Legal guardianship," Elias said, reading the telegram again to make sure he hadn't imagined it. "Marin, you're officially her mother now, in the eyes of the law. We're her parents." Marin crossed to him, reaching up to touch his face. "Both of us. If you still want—" "I want." He kissed her forehead, her cheeks, finally her mouth, not caring that Frank and Sarah were watching. "God, I want everything." Sarah was already planning. "We'll have the wedding here, next week, before the weather turns. I'll make your dress, Marin. Frank, you'll ride to town and arrange things with Pastor Williams, and we'll need food, lots of food, a proper celebration." "Sarah, you don't have to—" Marin started, but Sarah cut her off with a wave. "Nonsense. You two have been through hell and back. You deserve a wedding that's about joy, not just necessity. Let me do this, please." Marin looked at Elias, a question in her eyes. He nodded, smiling. "Let her do it. You'll lose this argument anyway. Sarah Henderson's a force of nature when she sets her mind to something." "Damn right I am," Sarah said cheerfully, already mentally cataloging tasks. "Now come inside, all of you. We have plans to make and a baby to celebrate. Adele's safe, you're getting married, and by God, we're going to do this right." They spent the evening around the Hendersons' kitchen table, mapping out the future. Tom's telegram had changed everything. With Robert Kane in custody and Gage Rowden dead, the threat was over. Marin and Adele could live openly, without fear. The land in Denver was secure, tied up in legal protections that would ensure Adele inherited when she came of age. "What will you do about the property?" Frank asked. "That's valuable land, sitting empty." "Lease it," Marin said without hesitation. "We'll hire a lawyer in Denver to manage it. Lease it to businesses or the railroad, whatever makes sense. The income will go into a trust for Adele. When she's grown, she can decide what to do with it. Sell it, develop it, keep it. Her choice." "And you'll stay here? In Colorado?" Sarah asked hopefully. Elias and Marin exchanged a look. "We'll rebuild the ranch," Elias said. "It's home, or it will be, once we put walls and a roof on it again." "You'll need help with that," Frank said. "I've got timber I can spare, and my boys know their way around a saw. We can have you a house by Christmas if we start soon." "Frank, I can't ask you to—" "You're not asking, I'm offering. And before you get all proud and stubborn about it, remember that you saved my life when that bull gored me 5 years back. I still owe you for that. This makes us even." Elias remembered that day, Frank bleeding in the dirt, the bull still raging, and Elias dragging him to safety before the animal could finish the job. He'd never thought of it as a debt, just what neighbors did. "Then we're even," he agreed, extending his hand. Frank shook it firmly. "We start next week, right after the wedding." The week that followed was a blur of activity. Sarah threw herself into wedding preparations with the enthusiasm of a general planning a campaign. She enlisted Martha Hendricks from town, and together they transformed the Hendersons' modest ranch house into something approaching festive. Wildflowers appeared in every available container. Sarah's good china was washed and polished. The barn was cleaned out and decorated with ribbons and lanterns for the reception. Marin's dress came together like magic under Sarah's skilled fingers. It was simple, white cotton with delicate embroidery at the collar and cuffs, but it fit Marin perfectly, highlighting her slender frame and the new strength in her shoulders from weeks of ranch work. "You look beautiful," Sarah said on the morning of the wedding, helping Marin with the final buttons. "Absolutely beautiful." Marin stared at herself in the mirror, hardly recognizing the woman looking back. 6 weeks ago, she'd been running for her life, bleeding and desperate. Now she stood in a borrowed bedroom, wearing a wedding dress, about to marry a man who'd saved her life and stolen her heart.
"I never thought I'd have this," she said softly. "A wedding, a family, a future. After Margaret died, after I took Adele and ran, I thought that was it. Survival was the best I could hope for. But you got more than survival." Sarah squeezed her shoulders gently. "You got love. Real, honest love. That's worth fighting for." "It is." Marin touched the dress, feeling the careful stitches. "Sarah, I don't know how to thank you for everything you've done. You thank me by being happy, by building a good life with Elias and that baby, by staying close and letting us be part of it all." Sarah's eyes were wet. "I never had children of my own, couldn't. But watching you three become a family, that's been a gift. Don't you dare thank me for that." They hugged carefully, mindful of the dress, both of them crying a little. Downstairs, Elias was having a similar conversation with Frank. He wore his only suit, dark wool, a bit tight in the shoulders from years of hard work building muscle, and boots polished to a shine. His hands wouldn't stop shaking. "You're nervous," Frank observed, amused. "I fought in the war. I've faced down outlaws and outlasted blizzards. But this?" Elias looked at his trembling hands. "This terrifies me." "That's how you know it's real." Frank poured 2 fingers of whiskey into glasses and handed one to Elias. "To be honest, I'd worry if you weren't nervous. Marriage is serious business. You're promising forever to someone. That should scare you a little." "More than a little." Elias downed the whiskey in one swallow. "What if I mess it up? What if I'm not good enough for her?" "Too late to worry about that now. She already said yes." Frank refilled the glass. "But Elias, listen to me. You're a good man, one of the best I know. You've got a good heart, strong hands, and more courage than sense. That's exactly what Moran and Adele need. Stop doubting yourself and go get married." Elias took a deep breath, then another. All right, I can do this." "Of course you can. Now come on. Pastor Williams is waiting, and if we make him stand in that hot barn much longer, he's liable to melt." The ceremony was small but perfect. 20 people gathered in the decorated barn, neighbors and friends, people who'd known Elias for years and welcomed Marin without question. Pastor Williams stood at the front, his Bible open, his weathered face creased with a genuine smile. Elias stood beside him, Frank at his shoulder as best man. His heart hammered so hard he was sure everyone could hear it. Then the barn door opened and Marin appeared. She walked toward him slowly, Adele in her arms instead of a bouquet. Sarah had fashioned a tiny white dress for the baby, and Adele gazed around with wide, curious eyes, perfectly behaved for once. Marin's face was radiant, tears streaming down her cheeks even as she smiled. When she reached Elias's side, he couldn't speak for a moment. She was the most beautiful thing he'd ever seen. "Hi," she whispered. "Hi," he managed. Pastor Williams cleared his throat, drawing their attention back to the task at hand. "Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today to witness the union of Elias Ward and Marin Cole in holy matrimony." The words washed over Elias in a haze. He heard himself responding at the right moments, heard Marin's voice steady and clear beside him. But mostly, he just stared at her, memorizing every detail. The way the lamplight caught in her dark hair, the silver of her eyes, the curve of her smile. Then came the vows. "Elias," Pastor Williams prompted, "repeat after me. I, Elias Ward." "I, Elias Ward," he began, his voice rough with emotion. "Take you, Marin Cole, to be my lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish till death do us part." Marin's turn. Her voice shook but never wavered. "I, Marin Cole, take you, Elias Ward, to be my lawfully wedded husband, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish till death do us part." "The rings?" Pastor Williams asked. Frank produced 2 simple gold bands, his own wife's rings from before she passed, offered freely when he learned Elias had none. Elias slipped one onto Marin's finger, and she did the same for him, their hands clasped tight. By the power vested in me by the territory of Colorado, I now pronounce you husband and wife. Pastor Williams beamed. Elias, you may kiss your bride. Elias cupped Marian's face in his hands and kissed her softly, reverently, as if she were something precious and breakable. She kissed him back, one hand on his chest, Adele cradled safely between them. The barn erupted in applause and cheers. Someone started playing a fiddle. Martha Hendricks was crying openly, and Sarah was hugging Frank and laughing. They were married. The celebration lasted well into the night. There was food, roasted chicken, fresh bread, vegetables from Sarah's garden, and 3 different pies. There was music and dancing, with Elias spinning Marin around the barn floor while she laughed breathlessly. There were toasts, some heartfelt and some hilarious, until everyone was a little drunk and a lot happy. At some point, Elias found himself standing outside the barn with Tom Bridger, who'd arrived just in time for the ceremony. The sheriff had a glass of whiskey in hand and a satisfied expression on his weathered face. "Hell of a wedding," Tom said. "Hell of a way to end a hell of a story." "It's not ended yet," Elias said. "Still got a ranch to rebuild." "True, but the hard part's over. Kane's locked up tight in Denver, awaiting trial. His lawyers are scrambling, but they've got nothing. Between Gage's letters, the testimony from his surviving men, and the evidence Margaret documented, it's an airtight case." Tom sipped his whiskey. "He'll hang Elias, or spend the rest of his life in prison. Either way, he'll never hurt another soul." "Good." Elias felt a grim satisfaction. Margaret's death would be avenged. Adele would grow up knowing her mother's killer had faced justice. "There's one more thing." Tom reached into his jacket and pulled out an envelope. "This came from Iran, from the court in Denver. Thought she'd want it today." Elias took the envelope, recognizing the official seal. "What is it?" "Legal adoption papers. If you and Marin both sign, Adele officially becomes Adele Ward. Not just guardianship, full adoption, with all the rights and protections that entails." Tom smiled. "Figured you'd want to make it official." "Yeah." Elias's throat was tight. "Yeah, we would." "Thank you, Tom." "Just doing my job." Tom finished his whiskey and set the glass aside. "You take care of them, Elias. That woman and that baby, they're special. You're a lucky man." "I know." "Good, don't forget it." When the last guest had left and the barn was quiet, Elias found Marin sitting in a chair, nursing Adele in the soft lamplight. She looked up when he entered, a tired but radiant smile on her face. "Mrs. Ward," he said, testing the name. "Mr. Ward," she replied, her smile widening. "That sounds good." "It does." He sat beside her, watching Adele nurse. The baby's tiny hand was curled against Marin's breast, her eyes half closed with contentment. "Tom brought something. Adoption papers for Adele. If we sign, she's legally ours. Adele Ward." Marin's eyes filled with tears. "He brought them to our wedding." "Said he figured we'd want them today." Elias pulled the envelope from his pocket. "What do you think?" "I think," Marin's voice broke. "I think Margaret would be happy, knowing her daughter has a father who loves her, a real family, a name that's hers by choice, not just inheritance." "Then we'll sign." Elias opened the envelope, spreading the papers on the small table. "Tomorrow, when everything's official. Tonight, we celebrate." Adele finished nursing and let out a satisfied burp that made both of them laugh. Marin adjusted the baby to her shoulder, patting her back gently. "I can't believe this is real," she said softly. "This morning I woke up as Marin Cole, running from my past. Tonight I'm Marin Ward, married, with a daughter and a future. It's like a dream." "It's real." Elias wrapped his arm around her, pulling both of them close. Every bit of it. The good, the bad, the terrifying, the beautiful. All real. "I love you," Marin said, leaning her head against his shoulder. "I don't say it enough, but I do. So much it scares me sometimes." "I love you too." He kissed the top of her head. "And Adele, our daughter." "Our daughter," Marin repeated, wonder in her voice. "That sounds perfect." They sat together in the quiet barn, the 3 of them, as the lamp burned low and the night deepened around them.
Outside, the Colorado stars blazed in their millions, indifferent and eternal. But inside this small circle of light, in this moment, everything that mattered in the world was here. The next morning, they signed the adoption papers at the Hendersons' kitchen table, with Frank and Sarah serving as witnesses. Marin's signature was steady despite her tears. Elias's was bold and certain. And just like that, Adele Cole Kane became Adele Margaret Ward, named for the mother she'd never know but would always honor.
There, Sarah said, blotting the signatures carefully. Now it's official. You're a family in every way that counts. We were always a family, Marin said, holding Adele close. But this makes it real for the world to see. What's next? Frank asked.
Besides rebuilding the ranch, I mean. We live, Elias said simply. We build a home, raise our daughter, work the land. We have a future, and we're going to live every bit of it. They spent 2 more days at the Henderson Ranch, resting and recovering from the whirlwind of the wedding. Then it was time to return to Elias's land, to begin the work of rebuilding. The ruins were less shocking the second time, though no less devastating. Elias stood in what had been his living room, now open to the sky, and tried to envision what it would become. Bigger, he said aloud. The house should be bigger, 3 bedrooms at least, maybe 4, if we're planning ahead. A proper kitchen, Marin added, standing beside him with Adele strapped to her chest. With a real stove and a root cellar that doesn't flood. And windows, lots of windows. I want light. Windows, Elias nodded, making mental notes. What else? A porch. A big one where we can sit in the evenings and watch the sunset. Where Adele can play when she's older. A barn that doesn't burn down would be nice too, Elias said dryly, and Marin laughed despite herself. Yes, that would be ideal. They walked the property together, planning and dreaming. Frank and his crew would arrive next week with timber and tools. By winter, they'd have walls and a roof. By spring, they'd have a home. It's going to be beautiful, Marin said, standing on the spot where the porch would be, looking out at the mountains. I can see it already. Adele running through those fields, maybe a brother or sister chasing her. A garden over there, and a swing hanging from that oak tree. You're really thinking ahead. Someone has to. She turned to face him, her expression serious. Elias, I know we've been through hell. I know the last 2 months have been nothing but fear and fighting and running. But now we get to choose what comes next, and I choose this. I choose us. I choose building something beautiful from these ashes. So do I. He pulled her close, careful of Adele between them. Every day, for the rest of my life, I choose this. That evening, they made camp in the ruins, just as they had the night of the ambush. But this time, there was no fear, no watching the shadows for attackers. Just a fire, a meal of salt pork and beans, and the 3 of them together under the stars. Adele was growing fast. At 5 weeks old, she was starting to focus on faces, to track movement with her eyes. She made soft, cooing sounds that Marin insisted were the beginning of speech. She had Elias's habit of frowning in her sleep, her tiny face scrunching up in what looked like deep concentration. What do you think she's dreaming about? Marin asked, watching the baby sleep. Milk, probably, Elias said. Maybe that annoying rattle Martha gave her. Be serious. I am serious. Babies dream about baby things. Marin elbowed him lightly. I like to think she's dreaming about the future. About running through fields and learning to ride. About growing up safe and loved, never knowing how close she came to losing everything. She'll know eventually, Elias said quietly. When she's older, we'll tell her about Margaret, about how brave her mother was, about how you saved her. How we saved her, Marin corrected. I couldn't have done it without you. I'd be dead in that barn if you hadn't heard her cry. Funny how things work out. Elias stared into the fire. If the storm had been quieter, if I'd fixed that barn door like I meant to, if I'd decided it was too dangerous to go out, we never would have met. Adele would have died. You would have died. And I'd still be alone, just existing, waiting for time to pass. But that's not what happened. Marin took his hand. The storm came. The door broke. You went out, and you found us. That's not chance, Elias. That's fate. That's the universe deciding we belong together.
You really believe that? I have to.
Because otherwise it's too terrifying. Otherwise it's just random luck that we survived, and random luck can run out. She squeezed his hand. So yes, I believe it was fate. I believe we were meant to find each other. And I believe we're going to have a beautiful life together. Elias hoped she was right. He wanted to believe in fate, in destiny, in something bigger than just chance and circumstance. But he'd seen too much of life's randomness to fully trust it. So instead of debating philosophy, he simply said, I love you. I love you too. They slept under the stars that night, the three of them wrapped in blankets, close enough to share warmth. Adele woke twice for feeding, and both times Elias stayed awake with Marin, keeping watch, even though there was nothing to watch for anymore. Old habits died hard. As dawn broke over the mountains, painting the world in shades of gold and rose, Elias made a silent promise to the woman and child sleeping beside him. He would rebuild this ranch. He would make it a home worthy of them. He would work every day to deserve the second chance he'd been given. And he would never, ever take for granted the miracle of their survival. When Frank and his crew arrived a week later, the work began in earnest. They cleared the rubble, salvaged what could be saved, and laid new foundations. The sound of hammers and saws filled the valley from dawn to dusk. Marin worked alongside them when Adele slept, proving she could swing a hammer and haul lumber with the best of them. You've got a good one there, Frank told Elias one afternoon, watching Marin help frame a wall. Strong, not afraid of work. I know, Elias said, pride evident in his voice. You planning to keep her busy with ranch work, or are you going to give her some babies to keep her occupied? Elias felt heat rise in his face. That's none of your damn business, Frank. Frank laughed. That's what I thought. Well, you'd better make that nursery a good size. Something tells me you'll be filling it sooner rather than later. By mid-October, they had walls. By early November, they had a roof. By Thanksgiving, they had a house, raw and unfinished in places, but solid and warm and theirs. They moved in on a cold November evening, carrying their few possessions across the threshold. Marin stood in the middle of the main room, turning slowly to take it all in. It's perfect, she breathed. It's empty, Elias corrected. We need furniture, curtains, all the things that make a house a home. We'll get them. But Elias, this... She gestured at the walls, the windows, the stone fireplace Frank had helped build. This is already home, because you built it. For us. That night, they christened their new home by making love for the first time as husband and wife in their own bed, in their own room, with no fear of discovery or attack. It was tender and unhurried, a celebration of survival and love and new beginnings. Afterward, lying tangled together under a quilt Sarah had sewn as a wedding gift, Marin said, I'm pregnant. Elias went very still. What? I'm pregnant. She turned to face him, her expression a mixture of nervousness and joy. I've known for about a week. I wanted to wait until we were settled to tell you. He couldn't form complete words. His hand moved to her stomach, pressing gently against the flat plane. Are you sure? I'm sure. Sarah confirmed it. She knows the signs. Marin covered his hand with hers. I know it's fast. I know we just got married and we're still rebuilding and Adele's so young. But Elias, I'm happy. Are you happy? Happy? He pulled her close, burying his face in her hair. Marin, I'm terrified and thrilled and completely overwhelmed. But yes, God, yes, I'm happy. She laughed, the sound muffled against his chest. Good, because this baby's coming whether we're ready or not. Probably around June, if Sarah's right. June. Elias did the math. So around the wedding night. Possibly, or shortly after. Does it matter? Not even a little bit. He kissed her forehead, her cheeks, her mouth. Another baby. Our baby. Adele's going to be a big sister. She is. Marin's eyes were shining. We're really doing this, Elias. We're building a family, a real one. Yeah, he said, his voice thick with emotion. We really are. As winter settled over Colorado, the small family settled into their new life. The house slowly filled with furniture, some new, some borrowed, some built by Elias's own hands. Marin sewed curtains for the windows and rugs for the floors. Adele grew and thrived, her dark eyes bright with curiosity, her smile quick and frequent. And inside Marin, their second child grew, a secret promise of the future they were building together. It was everything Elias had never dared to hope for. Everything and more. Winter passed in a blur of quiet domesticity and hard work. The ranch demanded constant attention, even in the cold months, animals to feed, fences to repair, firewood to chop. But inside the new house, warmth and life bloomed. Adele grew from a tiny newborn into a chubby, curious baby who laughed at everything and demanded constant attention. Marin's belly swelled with their second child, and Elias found himself hovering over her like a nervous hawk, worried about every twinge and stumble. "I'm pregnant, not made of glass," Marin told him one February morning after he'd practically tackled her to prevent her from lifting a full water bucket. "Women have been doing this since the beginning of time." "Not my women," Elias said stubbornly. "You're carrying my child, our child. You're not lifting anything heavier than Adele, and that's final." Elias Ward, "You are the most infuriating, overprotective, wonderful man I've ever met." But she was smiling as she said it, and when he pulled her close, carefully, always so carefully now, she melted into his arms. "I just want you safe," he murmured against her hair. "Both of you. After everything we went through, after almost losing you, I can't help it." "I know." She pulled back to look at him, her gray eyes soft. "But you didn't lose me. I'm right here. We're all right here. And we're going to be fine." News from Denver arrived sporadically through the winter. Tom Bridger kept them updated by telegraph and occasional letters. Robert Kane's trial had begun in January, and it was every bit the spectacle expected. The newspapers covered it extensively. Wealthy businessman accused of murdering his wife and attempting to murder his infant daughter for money. The evidence was overwhelming. Gage Rowden's letters, the testimony from his surviving men, Margaret's hidden documentation in the deed, and Marin's own sworn statement painted a picture of calculated evil that even Kane's expensive lawyers couldn't refute. In March, the verdict came. Guilty on all counts. The judge sentenced Robert Kane to hang. When the telegram arrived with the news, Marin read it twice, then sat down heavily in the rocking chair by the fireplace. Adele was on the floor nearby, playing with wooden blocks Elias had carved. The baby babbled happily, oblivious to the weight of the moment. "It's over," Marin said quietly. "Really, truly over. He can't hurt anyone ever again." Elias knelt beside her chair, taking her hand. "How do you feel?" "I don't know." She stared at the telegram. "Relieved, sad, angry that Margaret's not here to see justice done, grateful that Adele will never have to know him." Her voice cracked. "He was my brother-in-law. I sat at his dinner table. I watched him pretend to love my sister while planning her murder. How did I not see it?" "Because monsters don't always look like monsters," Elias said gently. "They look like normal people until they show their true faces. You couldn't have known. Margaret knew. At the end, she knew." Marin touched her swelling belly. "She died protecting Adele. Died making sure I could get her to safety. That's what I need to remember. Not Kane's evil, but Margaret's courage." "We'll tell Adele about her," Elias promised, "when she's old enough to understand. We'll tell her how brave her birth mother was, how much Margaret loved her, how she gave everything to keep her safe. And we'll tell her about you." Marin squeezed his hand. "How a cowboy heard a baby cry and changed 3 lives forever." The hanging was scheduled for late April, but neither Elias nor Marin attended. There was no satisfaction to be found in watching a man die, even one who deserved it. Instead, they spent that day on their ranch, working the land and caring for their daughter, choosing life over death. Spring arrived with an explosion of color and warmth. The mountains shed their snow, revealing green meadows dotted with wildflowers. Marin's garden burst into life, and she spent hours tending it, Adele strapped to her back in a sling while their unborn child kicked vigorously within her. "This one's going to be a fighter," she told Elias one evening, guiding his hand to feel the strong movements. "Feel that? That's not a gentle soul. That's someone who knows what they want." "Takes after you then," Elias said, grinning when Maureen swatted him. Adele was walking now, wobbly, uncertain steps that ended more often than not in her falling on her well-padded bottom. But she was determined, pulling herself up again and again, her dark eyes fierce with concentration. She'd inherited Marion's coloring and what looked like Margaret's bone structure, but her personality was entirely her own, bold, curious, and utterly fearless. "She's going to give us gray hair before we're 40, Elias predicted, watching Adele toddle toward the chickens with clear intention to grab one. "Probably," Marin agreed, scooping up the baby before she could terrorize the hens. "But she's ours, and she's perfect." "She is." Elias wrapped his arms around both of them. "You both are." May brought warmer weather and a steady stream of visitors. Frank and Sarah came weekly, bringing supplies and news from town. Martha Hendricks appeared one Sunday with a wagon full of baby clothes, hand-me-downs from various families in the valley, all carefully washed and mended. Tom Bridger stopped by on his rounds, always finding an excuse to check on them. "You've built something good here," Tom said one afternoon, watching Elias work on the new barn while Marin hung laundry and Adele napped in the shade. "Real good. Not just the buildings, I mean. The life. The family. After everything you all went through, you earned this peace." "We did," Elias agreed. "And I'm not taking a single day of it for granted." "Smart man." Tom adjusted his hat against the sun. "There's one more thing you should know. The court in Denver finalized Adele's inheritance trust last week. Between the land leases and some investments Margaret's father had made, it's substantial. By the time she comes of age, she'll be a wealthy woman." "That's her money," Elias said firmly. "We won't touch it. It's for her education, her future, whatever she chooses." "That's what I told them you'd say." Tom smiled. "You're a good father, Elias. Both those girls are lucky to have you." "I'm the lucky one." The baby came on a hot June afternoon, 2 weeks earlier than Sarah had predicted. Marin's water broke while she was picking beans in the garden, and by the time Elias got her into the house, the contractions were coming hard and fast. "Get Sarah," Marin gasped, gripping his hand so hard he thought bones might break. "Get her now." Elias ran faster than he'd ever run in his life, all the way to the Henderson Ranch and back with Sarah in tow. By the time they returned, Marin was on the bed, drenched in sweat, breathing through contractions that came one on top of another. "How long between pains?" Sarah asked, already rolling up her sleeves. "Maybe a minute? Less?" Elias was trying to remember everything Sarah had told him to watch for, but his mind was blank with panic. "Then we don't have much time. Elias, I need hot water and clean towels. Then I need you to watch Adele and stay out of the way unless I call you." "I'm not leaving her." "You are, right now. Unless you want to see things that will haunt you forever, you're going to trust me to do my job." Sarah's voice was kind, but brooking no argument. "Go." He went, though everything in him rebelled at leaving Marin. He gathered supplies, delivered them to Sarah, then retreated to the main room where Adele was just waking from her nap. The little girl looked around, confused by the sounds coming from the bedroom, Marin's cries of pain, Sarah's calm instructions. "Mama?" Adele asked, her voice uncertain. "Mama's fine," Elias said, picking her up. "Mama's bringing us a new baby, a brother or sister for you." "Baby?" Adele perked up. They'd been preparing her for weeks, showing her the cradle Elias had built, explaining that their family was growing. "That's right, baby." They waited. Elias paced the floor with Adele on his hip, listening to every sound from the bedroom. An hour passed, then 2. The sun was setting when he heard it, a new cry, high and thin and furious. His knees went weak with relief. A moment later, Sarah appeared in the doorway, her face flushed and smiling. "Congratulations. You have a son." "A son?" Elias could barely process the words. "Marin, is she—" "She's perfect, tired, but perfect. Come meet your boy." He carried Adele into the bedroom. Marin was propped up against the pillows, her hair damp with sweat, her face pale with exhaustion. But she was smiling, absolutely radiant, and in her arms was a tiny bundle wrapped in one of Sarah's quilts. "Elias," she said softly. "Come see." He approached the bed like a man in a dream. Marin pulled back the quilt, revealing a tiny red face, a shock of dark hair, and 2 tightly clenched fists. The baby's eyes were closed, but even in sleep his face was scrunched in what looked like indignation at being forced into the world. "He's perfect," Elias whispered, reaching out to touch one impossibly small hand. The baby's fingers wrapped around his index finger with surprising strength. Absolutely perfect. He is. Marin looked down at their son with such love it made Elias's chest ache. What should we name him? They discussed names for months but never settled on one. Now, looking at this tiny person who was half him and half the woman he loved, Elias knew exactly what felt right. Samuel, he said, after my father, if that's all right with you. Samuel Ward. Marin tested the name, smiling. I like it. Sam for short when he's being sweet. Samuel when he's in trouble. Which will be often if he's anything like his sister. Elias looked at Adele, who was staring at the baby with wide eyes. Adele, this is your brother, Samuel, Sam. You're going to help us take care of him. Baby, Adele said solemnly, reaching out to touch Samuel's face with surprising gentleness. My baby. Our baby, Marin corrected. Our family. Sarah slipped out quietly, giving them privacy. Elias sat on the edge of the bed, one arm around Marin, Adele on his lap, both of them gazing at the newest addition to their family. Outside, the summer evening was fading into night, crickets beginning their chorus. Inside, everything that mattered was here in this room. I love you, Elias said, looking at Marin over Samuel's head, more than I have words for. I love you too. She leaned her head against his shoulder. Thank you for saving us, for giving us this life. You saved me, he corrected. I was just existing before you. Now I'm living. Samuel woke then, his face scrunching up in preparation for a wail. Marin shifted him to nurse, and Elias watched in wonder as his son latched on and began to feed. Such a simple thing, nursing a baby. Such a profound miracle. The next months passed in the sweet exhaustion of new parenthood. Samuel proved to be a colicky baby, prone to crying jags that lasted for hours. Elias and Marin took turns walking the floor with him, bouncing and shushing and singing off-key lullabies until the baby finally settled. Adele adjusted to no longer being the center of attention with the resilience of a 14-month-old, alternating between trying to help with her brother and being jealous of the attention he received. By Samuel's first birthday the following June, the ranch was thriving. Elias had expanded the herd, built a proper barn that wouldn't burn down in a light breeze, and fenced the property properly. Marin's garden was producing enough vegetables to sell the surplus in town. They'd added chickens, 3 goats, and a pig Sarah insisted they needed for bacon. Adele was 2.5 now, running wild through the fields like a small tornado, her dark hair always escaping its braids. She'd inherited her birth mother's fierce intelligence and her adopted mother's stubborn determination. She was also developing a strong protective streak toward her baby brother, threatening any ranch hand who made Samuel cry with toddler fury that was more adorable than intimidating. She's going to be a force when she grows up, Frank observed one afternoon, watching Adele order around children twice her age at a church social. The kind of woman who doesn't take nonsense from anyone. Like her mothers, Elias said, pride evident in his voice. Margaret and Marin both. She's got the best of them. She's got a lot of you too. That stubborn jaw, that's pure Ward. Elias couldn't argue with that. Life settled into a rhythm. Seasons turned. Samuel grew from colicky infant to chubby toddler to sturdy little boy. Adele started helping with real chores, feeding chickens, gathering eggs, pulling weeds in the garden. Marin's belly swelled twice more, bringing them a daughter they named Grace in the fall of 1881, and another son, James, in the spring of 1883. The house that had seemed too big when they first built it now felt exactly right, filled with the chaos and noise of 4 children. The walls echoed with laughter and arguments and the thunder of small feet. The table Elias had built seated 8 comfortably, and they needed every chair at mealtime. This is what I dreamed of, Marin told him one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sunset. Adele and Samuel were chasing fireflies in the meadow, while Grace toddled after them and baby James slept in Marine's arms. When I was running, when I was bleeding in that barn, when I thought we'd both die, this is what I dreamed of. This life, this family, this peace. You have it now, Elias said, pulling her close. And we're never letting it go. On a cool October evening in 1884, 6 years after that storm-torn night when Elias first heard a baby's cry in his barn, the family gathered on the porch for supper. The new table Frank had helped Elias build last spring groaned under the weight of Marin's cooking: roasted chicken, fresh bread, vegetables from the garden, apple pie cooling on the windowsill. Adele was 6 now, tall and wild-haired, already reading at a level that amazed the schoolteacher in town. Samuel was 5, quieter than his sister, but with a mind that worked constantly, always taking things apart to see how they worked. Grace was 3, all giggles and mischief, her mother's gray eyes sparkling with constant amusement. And James, the baby at 18 months, was just beginning to string words together, mostly no and mine and cookie. "Adele, stop teasing your brother," Marin called from the stove. "Samuel, give your sister back her doll. Grace, we do not feed chicken to the dog under the table. James, how did you get pie on your face before dinner even started?" It was chaos. It was perfect. Elias watched his family with a contentment so deep it was almost painful. 6 years ago, he'd been alone, convinced his life was over, that he'd used up his chance at happiness. Now he was surrounded by life and love and noise, by children who called him Papa and a wife who still looked at him like he'd hung the moon. "What are you thinking about?" Marin asked, sitting down beside him with James on her lap. "How lucky I am." "We're the lucky ones." She leaned over to kiss his cheek. "You saved us, remember?" "You saved me," he countered. "Fair trade." Adele climbed into his other side, snuggling close. "Papa, tell the story." "What story, little bird?" "The story about the barn and the storm and how you found us." Adele had heard the story 100 times, but she never tired of it. None of the children did. It was their origin story, the beginning of their family. Elias looked at Marin, who nodded. So he began. "It was a storm-torn Colorado night in 1878, he started, and immediately all 4 children settled in to listen, even baby James going quiet. The wind was howling like a demon, and the rain was coming down so hard I could barely see my hand in front of my face. I was just about to go to bed when I heard something strange, a sound that didn't belong to the storm." "A baby crying," Samuel said, unable to help himself. "That's right, a baby crying." So I grabbed my lantern and went out into that storm, fighting the wind every step of the way. And when I got to the barn, you know what I found? "Mama Marin and baby Adele," Grace shouted. "Exactly. Your Mama Marin, who'd been hurt and was very brave, and baby Adele, who was crying because she was scared and cold and hungry. And I brought them both into the house, and I promised to keep them safe no matter what." "And then the bad man came," Adele said, her voice dropping dramatically. "He did, but we were stronger. We were braver. And with the help of Sheriff Tom and our good friends, we stopped him. We made sure you'd always be safe." "And then you got married," Grace clapped her hands. "And then we got married," Elias confirmed, smiling at Maureen over the children's heads. "And then Samuel came, and then Grace, and then James, and now here we all are, a family." "The best family," Adele declared. "Right, Papa?" "The absolute best," Elias agreed. They ate dinner as the sun set, painting the mountains in shades of gold and crimson. The children chattered about their day, Adele about the book she was reading, Samuel about the bird's nest he'd found, Grace about her new friend from church, James about his newfound ability to say horsey. After dinner, Marin put the younger children to bed, while Elias sat on the porch with Adele. At 6, she was old enough now to stay up a little later, and she treasured these quiet moments with her father. "Papa, can I ask you something?" She looked up at him with those dark eyes that reminded him so much of Margaret, the woman he'd never met but whose courage had saved her daughter. "Always." "Do you think my first mama would be proud of me? Birth mama, I mean. Mama Margaret." Elias's throat tightened. They'd told Adele the truth on her 5th birthday, carefully explaining that she'd had 2 mothers who both loved her, Margaret, who'd given her life and protected her, and Marin, who'd raised her and loved her as her own. Adele had taken it in stride, accepting it as another part of her story. "I know she would be," Elias said firmly. "She died to keep you safe, Adele, to give you a chance at a good life. And look at you now. You're smart and brave and kind. You're everything she hoped you'd be. I wish I could have known her." "Me too, but she lives on in you. Every time you're brave, every time you stand up for what's right, every time you protect your brothers and sister. That's Margaret. That's her courage in you." Adele leaned against his side, satisfied with that answer. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars emerge one by one. "Papa?" "Yes, little bird?" "I'm glad you heard me crying that night. I'm glad the storm came and the barn door broke and everything happened exactly the way it did, because it gave me you and Mama Moran and Sam and Grace and James. It gave me this family." "I'm glad too," Elias said, his voice rough. "So very glad." Marin emerged from the house, having finally gotten all three younger children settled. She sat down on Elias's other side, and they stayed like that for a long while. The three of them who'd started it all, watching the night deepen over the land they'd built their life on.
"All of this started because you followed a baby's cry," Marin said softly, echoing Adele's earlier sentiment. Elias looked at his wife, at the daughter he'd claimed as his own, at the house full of sleeping children who carried his name and his love. He thought about that storm-torn night 6 years ago, about the choice he'd made to go out into the darkness instead of staying safe inside, about how one decision, one moment of responding to a cry for help had changed everything. "Best choice I ever made," he said. And as the Colorado stars blazed overhead, as the night wind carried the scent of sage and wildflowers, as his family surrounded him with warmth and love, Elias Ward knew it was true. Every hardship, every danger, every moment of fear had been worth it, because it had led him here, to this porch, with these people, in this life. He'd been dead inside for 10 years, just existing, waiting for time to pass. Then a baby cried, and he'd come back to life. He'd found a family in the ruins of tragedy. He'd built a home from ashes. He'd discovered that second chances were real, that love could bloom even in the darkest circumstances, that choosing to help a stranger could be the most important decision of a life. The story that began with blood and fear and desperation had become a story of hope and healing and home. And it was far from over. There would be more children, more challenges, more seasons of joy and sorrow, but they would face it all together. This family that shouldn't have existed but did. This miracle born from a cowboy's compassion and a woman's courage. Years later, when Adele was grown with children of her own, she would tell them the story of the storm and the barn and the cowboy who saved a baby's life. She would tell them about bravery and sacrifice, about two mothers who loved her and a father who chose her. She would tell them that family isn't just blood, it's choice and commitment and love. And she would end the story the same way every time, the way her papa had always ended it. All of this started because a cowboy heard a baby cry. And that cowboy, your great-grandfather Elias, made a choice. He chose to help. He chose to protect. He chose love over safety, courage over comfort. And that choice changed everything. But for now, on this October evening in 1884, the story was still being written. On the porch of a ranch house in Colorado, a cowboy held his wife's hand and watched his eldest daughter chase fireflies through the twilight. Inside, 3 more children slept peacefully in their beds. Around them, the land they'd built together stretched out beneath an endless sky. And Elias Ward, who'd once been certain his story was over, smiled at the beautiful chaos of his life and knew with absolute certainty that the best chapters were still to come. The end.